The weight of silver. The mine shaft opened like a dark mouth in the earth, its wooden supports creaking as James lowered himself down the rope. The lamp swung from his belt, casting wild shadows against stone walls that bore the scars of someone else's labor. The original miner, William Garrett, dead 6 years now at Cornelius Blackwood's hand. James's boots found the narrow ledge 20 feet down where the main vein ran through white quartz. His side ached where the bullet wound had healed, the scar tissue pulling with each movement. 3 months since he'd nearly died. 3 months since his family had fought a war without him. "Secure," he called up. Eleanor's face appeared at the shaft opening, backlit by morning sun. "Be careful." He wanted to tell her he always was, but they'd stopped lying to each other about such things. Instead, he nodded and turned to examine the vein by lamplight. The silver ran through the quartz like frozen lightning, metallic threads that caught the light and threw it back. His quarry experience in Ontario told him this was good ore, maybe very good. But knowing that and getting it to the surface were different matters entirely. He set his pick against the rock and swung. The impact jarred through his arms, sending vibrations up into his healing shoulder. The quartz fractured along natural lines, and he worked the pick into the crack, prying loose a chunk the size of his fist. Silver gleamed through the white stone. "First piece coming up," he called. The bucket descended on its rope, and he loaded the ore carefully. 3 more swings yielded 2 more pieces before the bucket rose again, Eleanor hauling hand over hand at the windlass they'd rigged above. This would be their life for the next 2 weeks. Dawn to dusk, James in the shaft breaking ore while Eleanor hauled it up and Sarah and Thomas sorted it by the growing pile. Dangerous work. Exhausting work. But necessary work if they wanted to turn theoretical wealth into actual money before winter locked the prairie in ice. James swung the pick again, and a larger section of quartz broke free. He caught it before it could fall and damage the vein below, muscles straining. Sweat ran down his face despite the shaft's coolness. "You all right down there?" Eleanor's voice carried an edge of worry. "Fine, just a big piece." He loaded it into the bucket and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. The lamp's flame wavered. The air was getting close. He'd need to come up soon, let fresh air circulate before continuing. Above, Sarah's voice joined Eleanor's. "Papa, there's a crack in the support beam on the east side. We can see it from here." James turned his lamp toward the timber Eleanor mentioned. The beam was one of Garrett's original supports, 6 years old and bearing the weight of prairie earth. A hairline crack ran through it at an angle, barely visible but definitely there. His stomach tightened. "How wide?" "Thin as a knife blade," Sarah called down. "But it wasn't there yesterday." No, it wasn't, which meant his work was stressing the supports in ways Garrett's initial excavation hadn't. The mine was deeper now, the shaft wider where James had been following the vein. He examined the crack more closely. Not immediately dangerous, but it would spread. Wood under stress always did. They'd need to reinforce it, which meant stopping work to cut and fit a new support beam, or they could keep working and hope it held. James thought of the bank payment due in 6 weeks, thought of the consortium in Toronto, patient and ruthless, waiting for winter to make their next move. Thought of Thomas's face when he'd asked if the bad men were coming back. "Send down the rope," he said. "I'm coming up." Eleanor hauled him to the surface, and he stood blinking in the October sunlight. The pile of ore they'd extracted over the past 4 days sat covered with canvas near the homestead, maybe 200 pounds of quartz shot through with silver. Not enough yet. Not nearly enough. Sarah stood by the windlass, her hands wrapped in cloth to protect against rope burn. She'd changed over the summer, his daughter. Taller, harder, with eyes that had seen too much. She could kill a man now without hesitation. She'd proven that. The thought made him ache. "Show me the crack," he said. They gathered at the shaft opening, and Sarah pointed. The crack was exactly as she'd described. Thin but definite, running at an angle through the support beam. "We need to reinforce it," Eleanor said. "Today." "That's half a day's work," James replied. "Maybe more. We'd need to cut a beam, fit it properly, shore up the existing support while we work." "And if we don't?" Sarah asked. James looked at his daughter's face, then at Eleanor's, then down at Thomas, who'd come over from the ore pile where he'd been sorting. His son's eyes were serious, waiting for an honest answer. The beam could fail, James said. Might hold for days. Might go this afternoon. No way to know. Then we reinforce it, Eleanor said firmly. We lose time we don't have. We lose you if that beam fails while you're down there. Eleanor's voice was flat, brooking no argument. We've nearly lost you twice this year, James Mackenzie. I won't risk it again for silver we might not even need. We do need it, James said quietly. The consortium's not gone, they're waiting. And when they come back, we need resources to fight them. Money for lawyers, for protection, For what? Eleanor interrupted. For a mine that crushes you beneath the earth? For wealth we can't spend because you're buried in that shaft? The words hung between them, sharp and true. Sarah cleared her throat. What if we work in shorter shifts? Papa goes down for an hour, comes up, lets the air clear and gives the supports time to settle. Then back down for another hour. That's less ore, James said, but safer, Sarah countered. And we can watch the crack. If it spreads, we stop and reinforce. If it holds, we keep going. James looked at his daughter. When had she learned to think like this? To balance risk against reward? To find the middle path between recklessness and paralysis? Eleanor was watching him, and he saw the calculation in her eyes. She didn't like the compromise, but she recognized its wisdom. They needed the ore, but they needed James alive to spend it. All right, he said. 1 hour shifts, but we mark the crack now, measure it precisely. Any change at all, we stop. They spent the next 20 minutes rigging a careful measurement, a piece of straw wedged into the crack at its widest point, positioned so they could see immediately if it shifted. Then James descended again. The work went slower with the new rhythm. 1 hour down, 30 minutes up. The ore pile grew, but not as quickly as before. By noon they had perhaps 50 pounds more, and the crack hadn't widened. During his second rest period, Daniel Thornton rode up, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. Thought you might need fresh water, he said, swinging down from the saddle. His eyes found Sarah immediately, and something passed between them that made James look away. His daughter and the Thornton boy. When had that happened? He knew, of course. It had been building for months, crystallizing during the violence of summer. But seeing it confirmed, seeing the way they looked at each other, made him feel the passage of time like a physical weight. How's the work going? Daniel asked, approaching the shaft. James explained about the cracked beam and their new system. Daniel listened, then knelt to examine the support structure. My father worked in a coal mine before we came west, he said. He taught me about shoring. That crack's in a bad spot. It's bearing weight from the whole eastern wall. I know, James said, but there's a technique for reinforcing without stopping work. We sister a new beam alongside the old one, bolt them together. The new beam takes the load gradually while the old one stays in place. Done right, it's actually stronger than replacing the beam entirely. James considered this. You'd need to be in the shaft to do it properly. I would, Daniel agreed. He looked at Sarah again. I'd like to help, if you'll have me. The offer hung in the morning air. James understood what Daniel was really saying, that he wanted to be part of this family's struggle, to share their burdens and their risks. That he loved Sarah enough to descend into a potentially unstable mine shaft to keep her father safe. We'd be grateful, Eleanor said before James could respond. She'd come up from the ore pile, her hands dusty with quartz powder. James could use someone with experience down there. So the work changed again. James and Daniel together in the shaft, working in coordinated rhythm. Daniel positioned the new support beam, while James continued extracting ore, and between them, they bolted the reinforcement into place. The crack stopped spreading. By evening, they had 400 pounds of ore under canvas, and the shaft felt solid again. Daniel stayed for supper, and afterward James watched him and Sarah walk toward the creek in the fading light, their figures silhouetted against the sunset. Let them be, Eleanor said quietly, coming to stand beside him. I know. She loves him, and he's a good man. I know that too. James put his arm around his wife's shoulders. It's just, when did she grow up? When we weren't looking. When she had to. Eleanor leaned into him. They all grew up, James. This summer made sure of that. They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching their daughter and the young man who loved her. Somewhere in Toronto, wealthy men in expensive suits were planning their destruction. Somewhere on the prairie, winter was gathering its strength. But here, now, there was peace. The next morning, James descended into the shaft with renewed purpose. The work had found its rhythm. 2 men below, 2 women above, all of them moving in practiced coordination. The ore pile grew steadily. On the 6th day, Thomas called down, "Papa, the vein's getting wider." James examined the quartz face by lamplight. The boy was right. The silver threads that had been scattered through the stone were converging, growing thicker and more concentrated. This was what miners dreamed of, the point where a promising vein became a genuine strike. He worked more carefully now, extracting chunks where the silver ran thick as his thumb through the white stone. Each piece that went into the bucket was worth more than the last. "How much do we need?" Daniel asked, pausing in his work on the supports. 1,000 pounds of good ore should yield enough silver to pay the bank and have capital left over, James replied. "We're at maybe 600 now. 4 more days then, if the vein holds." "If the vein holds," James agreed. But the vein did more than hold. It widened further, until they were extracting ore so rich with silver it seemed to glow in the lamplight. By the 8th day they had 800 pounds. By the 10th they reached 1,000. James called a halt. They stood around the ore pile that evening, James, Eleanor, Sarah, Thomas, and Daniel, looking at what they'd accomplished. 1,000 pounds of silver-bearing quartz, extracted from 20 feet of prairie earth through sweat and risk and stubborn determination. "We did it," Thomas said, his voice filled with wonder. "We did," James confirmed. "Now we need to get it refined." That was the next challenge. The ore was worthless until the silver was separated from the quartz, and that required specialized equipment and expertise they didn't possess. They'd need to transport it to Medicine Hat, find a reputable assayer, and trust that the refining process would yield what they hoped. More risks, more unknowns. But as James looked at his family's faces in the firelight, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Genuine hope. They'd faced the mine's dangers and emerged with treasure. They'd worked together, protected each other, and proven that the wealth beneath their feet was real. The consortium in Toronto thought they were patient, thought they could wait out the winter and strike when the Mackenzies were weak. They didn't understand what this family had become. "Tomorrow we load the wagon," James said. "Day after we ride to Medicine Hat, all of us together." "All of us," Eleanor agreed. Sarah caught Daniel's eye across the fire, and he nodded slightly. Whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else this year. Together, stubborn, and absolutely unwilling to surrender what they'd fought so hard to claim. The silver gleamed beneath its canvas covering, catching the firelight and throwing it back like a promise. A promise of security, of justice, of a future they'd carved from stone and darkness and sheer determination. But as the fire burned down and the family prepared for bed, none of them noticed the figure watching from the distant rise. A man on horseback, silhouetted against the stars, observing the homestead with patient interest before turning his mount and riding east toward Medicine Hat. The consortium's eyes were everywhere, and the Mackenzies' triumph had not gone unnoticed.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.